when you talk at JM Smucker about human rights, what is the scope of human rights? And I'll preface that by saying that for a lot of people that are, let's say, newer in the field, human rights immediately conjures up the area that Cynthia works on, human trafficking and modern slavery. But if you look at the UN Declaration of Human Rights, there are 30 articles. It is very broad in scope. And so when you're defining at JM Smucker a human rights compliance program, what is the scope of that program? And then I'll go to you, Nancy, next.
Yeah, it's a great question, Bob. And you're absolutely right. I think many of us go immediately to modern slavery and human trafficking. At Smucker, our human rights work is informed and based on exactly what you said, really the international human rights principles, which includes the UN's Declaration of Human Rights, the ILO's Declaration of Fundamental Principles and Rights to Work, the UNGPs, or the UN's Guiding Principles on Business and Human Rights, and the ILO human rights conventions that are there. And for us, really over the last 5 years, we've been intentionally focused on understanding, protecting, and advancing human rights in our supply chain, and also within our own operations. So really looking to partner with our plant operations, third-party logistics providers, and our suppliers to ensure that the work environments are promoting equal opportunity. They're prohibiting discriminatory practices, providing a safe and hygienic working environment, making sure there's no presence of forced or child labor at those sites, and really looking at consistent recruitment and employment practices at those locations.
Okay, so it is then significantly broader than modern slavery and human trafficking, the way you are defining and implementing your human rights compliance program at JM Smucker.
Right.
Nancy, let's go to you.
Yeah, so that was a discovery for me personally, how broad this category can be, what it can encompass. And at Western Union, what we did is we really conducted an assessment for fintech companies like Western Union in our industry, what are the most common human rights issues? And so that kind of helped us to be able to get more of a focus. We knew that human trafficking and modern slavery would be a high concern, and that's already something that is really core to Western Union's compliance work around anti-money laundering and human trafficking. So that was something that came up for our industry and for Western Union. And then also data privacy was something that was very important, especially for fintech companies. So I think for any companies that are beginning to think about human rights, to look at their industry and look at their own companies and what kinds of things where do they have the greatest touch points as far as direct and indirect. But it's broad. It also includes things like diversity, discrimination, pay equity, all the kinds of issues that often ethics programs are involved in working on, and that affect other aspects of ESG reports and ESG strategy.
So when you talk about the breadth of it, it sounds like almost everything that would be in your code of conduct in some way, and maybe this is overgeneral, but to be a bit provocative, almost everything could fit under the umbrella of human rights.
I think yes, it seems that way to us as well, and also, the ESG has kind of the same. You're grappling with the same kind of thing with the ESG report and strategy. So I think you just have to start and focus on certain areas that you think you can have the greatest impact, where maybe there's the greatest risk for your company, where you can have the greatest impact and influence. So much is still around education and awareness. And so I think I encourage anyone who's working on human rights issues at their company to build a cross-functional team, because then you start to learn about how different work in different areas or different departments might view human rights and what are the most key areas. But yes, it could touch on so many different things, but in order to make progress, you have to focus on some key areas.
So can I just follow up on that answer and stay with you, Nancy? You mentioned cross-functional teams. Can you talk about how the Human Rights Compliance Program is organized at Western Union, who is involved, who has the ownership position, where is the ethics function?
Sure. So the enterprise risk group, we have an enterprise risk group that is part of our legal compliance and enterprise risk team. And that group is really primarily responsible for guiding our human rights, a statement that we're working on, and just thinking about human rights generally. And they involve HR, compliance, legal, let me make sure I'm thinking everyone, the ethics team, obviously. So those have been the kind of core members for this working group, but even that's evolving. We have procurement, people from our procurement team, people that work on our vendor oversight teams, people that are involved in due diligence for our agents. I mentioned that we have 500,000 agents globally. So we have lots of different people that can contribute to this work.